got to start things off today with a simple question. Have you seen the headlines across the internet? Here's one of them. Electronic Arts CEO says they're interested in putting ads in their video games. And of course, that's something that we're all going to feel. I don't know about you, but I really liked it whenever I fired up Amazon to watch the Fallout TV show, and then suddenly found out that my paid Amazon Prime subscription has now been downgraded to be ad-supported, even though I'm still paying money, and I now have to pay extra money in order to not get ads. So this encroachment of ads, I think it's something that we're all becoming very, familiar with. And that means that this story obviously blasted across the internet, and I totally get why. You see those headlines and immediately it confirms all of the things that you already know is terrible about EA and their leadership, right? It brings back all of those memories of the old days whenever EA was consistently getting themselves activist voted to being the worst company in America, which really is quite a feat when you take a look at some of the other companies in America. So, EA's investor call was last week, and that does mean that we've got a glimpse inside the inner workings of the mega publisher. That means upcoming games, a little bit of Battlefield, talk about financial performance, and yes, advertising. But on this show, the whole reason why it's more than just me, why there is a team, is we like to look at the why, not just the what, and actually understand why EA would even talk about something like this, because come on, surely they knew that this would explode across the internet with the force of today's sponsor. We're going to help us be less annoyed and more secure, so data leaks. They happen all the time. And like hungry vultures, data brokers exist to harvest that data and then sell it, which sucks. Now, the good news is we do have the legal right to be removed from data brokers' lists, right? The problem, though, is doing so takes ages. And that is where Incogni.com/Bellular News comes in, because they automate it for you, and code Bellular News gets you 60% off the annual plan. Now, I signed up a while back, right, and immediately they found me on 48 data brokers, they sent 42 takedown requests, and 6 were completed essentially instantly. Checking in more recently, they have sent 44, 6 are in progress, and 38 have been taken down. The most recent one, by the way, when I looked it up, it was Crosswalk Technologies. So I went to their site and I just saw this quote: dynamically monitors the digital behavior of over 100 million consumers worldwide. Which doesn't sound good. I don't want to be on their list. So by keeping you off these lists, your data is more safe, you're more secure, you'll get fewer annoyances like spam texts, spam mails, spam calls, and those like creepy person tracking websites like Being Verified, they help get you off those as well. And the great thing is they constantly rescan, so if you do get slurped up by a data broker, again, they will automatically get your info taken down. So give them a shot today at Incogni.com/Bellular News with code Bellular News for an exclusive 60% discount. Thanks then for sponsoring, and let's get into the video. Really was channeling my inner Linus with that sponsor segue, but okay, right. You've seen the tweets like this. Culture Crave. EA CEO says they're looking to put ads in their video games. Another one from Dexerto, right? Saying EA is interested in putting in-game ads in their AAA titles. And look at this very sad Eminem-looking dude. I mean, yeah, this obviously blew up. Everybody's been clowning on it, and we all know why. Pretty rough look, right? And this has been the lasting takeaway of their recent investor call. And it's an investor call that when we actually went through all of it, it didn't have that much to say. Like, EA is definitely having a quiet year, right? Lower performance, but just less releases, right? There's not as much going on. And of course, that's all following their layoffs. That said, there is a rather cute thing. They launched Apex's new season, which contained $40 weapon cosmetics at the same time that they announced live service revenue growth hadn't fully met expectations this quarter. I don't think that those things are a coincidence, and of course with Apex Legends, you know the ongoing story. They had amazing revenue peaks, but they've basically struggled to get their money back up, and that has meant the likes of getting the Buster Sword, that being very expensive, $40 weapon skins, and all of the usual clownery that you could expect. Now, we did learn a little bit about their release slate. It's definitely not the biggest EA release slate. What they did confirm, though, is 2 new non-sports games coming out before March 2025. There is going to be a partner title, which likely will be the EA original game, and then there is a owned IP title And we really don't have to speculate too much there. We basically know it's Dragon Age Dreadwolf. That's because Eurogamer have went on record with their sources. Here's just an excerpt from Eurogamer. One of these is Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Eurogamer understands which will be fully revealed this summer after years of teases. So that's what their sources are telling them, and I am inclined to believe that. I mean, come on, at this stage, Dreadwolf has actually got to come out at some day. So expect Dragon Age reveal this summer, and it likely coming out in the fourth quarter of this year. Of course, November 14th, 2024 is actually the decade anniversary of Dragon Age Inquisition, so I'm sure if they wanted to, they could do something cute around those dates. And it is quite funny, that's just 10 years of BioWare being a black hole that sucked in potential and success and really spat out nothing. Anyway, the other two stories come from the investor report, not just the advertising story that, of course, is the reason why we're all here. There's another quote which has been widely reported from the CEO, Andrew Wilson, and in it he's talking about his feelings on live services, and it does sound like the most ghoulish approach to game development possible. This is what he said, quote, "And again, as I've talked about in the prepared remarks, I've just spent a whole bunch of time with the collective Battlefield team playing what they're building, and it is going to be an other tremendous live service." Now, that quote has went around. It's been a little bit stripped of context though, so I think it's good if we put that context back in, because here, he's actually not answering a question about game development, he is trying to defend EA's reporting practices, right? Because of some investor dude asking that question. And basically, the company reports all of their live services under the same metrics, and the questioner basically wanted to know why. So Wilson's response is that everything counts for the company, and that just means that they need more of them, more live services. So as much as out of context, it is him talking about Battlefield in a way that just kind of makes you squirm a little bit. And of course, saying another successful live service is hilarious if you're a Battlefield fan. BF 2042, yeah, it has actually been on the uptick. It had done well, but come on, it was overall a total shit show. The idea of Battlefield having had any form of successful live service is of course preposterous in the eyes of most players. If you're like me, you will remember that yes, with Battlefield 1, you did have to purchase DLCs, but you probably also remember that that meant there was an absolute shed load of maps in that game, so much more content than any of the future Battlefield games would have. Now, the good news is Wilson did talk about Battlefield in a more like game-related way during his prepared comments. He basically talked about the closure of Ridgeline and the shift of Criterion and Motive's second team, and confirmed that the next Battlefield has got the biggest team ever for the franchise, which is potentially good, potentially not good. If it's just throwing bodies into the development heap, that could be quite rough. If, though, it is more about parallel development, then that actually can work quite well. So we'll obviously have to see. Now, what was notable to me is how woolly his language was. I mean, this is what Wilson said. Motive, armed with cutting-edge Frostbite technology and compelling storytelling, is joining DICE, Criterion, and Ripple Effect to build a Battlefield universe across connected multiplayer and single-player experiences. Because, yes, connected experiences, which very much means Wilson is not confirming what we're actually going to be getting, though he did still mention single player. Anyway, do remember that the last Battlefield game was made in about 12 months from the bones of essentially an extraction shooter with humongous staff turnover at DICE, so to be honest, it would be quite hard for them to cock up with the next one as much as they did with Battlefield 2024. Now, with that said, it does kind of give us the shape of today's story, right? There's what EA says of their own volition. That's the second quote that I talked about with Andrew, right? Andrew talking about the actual game itself. And then there's what EA will say when they are asked a question by investors. And that is how we get to the advertising component of today's story. This is because earnings calls are in two parts. The first part is a presentation from the company, right? Prepared remarks where they are expanding on their obligatory sort of reporting and that kind of thing, right? They're really controlling their own message. And then the other side is questions from people who are on the earnings call, who will often be representing large investors who really don't tend to be as interested in video games. As far as a lot of them are concerned, these companies, these corporations, they're just selling widgets. What they care about is just a lot of that performance and strategy. So we went through the transcription of both to basically bring you what's going on here. And for some context, right, here are the people who were on that Q&A. You had Morgan Stanley, who were asking a question about operating margin disclosure terms. We have UBS, who are asking about live service revenue expectations. There was Roth MKM, who were asking about live service reporting breakdowns. We have Raymond James, who asked, did Apex add solo mode back because of player demand? So, Raymond James, apparently, true gamers, the one investing group who actually seems to have asked a question to do with video games. I thought that was quite funny. R.W. Baird asked about mobile plans. Benchmark Company asked, of course, about AI plans over time, and Goldman Sachs are the people who asked about EA's plans for in-game advertising, right? You can see, though, that those are all general questions for the purpose of fund manager type people, okay? So that context, I think you can understand how the advertising topic came up. It's not something that EA actually brought up in their prepared remarks. It is something that was brought up to them, and then Wilson was essentially forced to respond. Now, the thing is, in regards to EA specifically, we've actually seen all of this before. As an example, there were adverts for the Obama campaign in Burnout Paradise, right? I even remember seeing advertisements for Battlefield DLC within Battlefield maps. We have Adidas, who have been selling a Miles Morales suit in Spider-Man, and to be honest, it looks absolutely like trash. I don't know why they thought that would be good. So this has been happening, and it's been happening in EA games already over the last few years. As an example, Warner Media is a partner with EA, and they proceeded to do some testing in a live environment. And that actually led to full-screen advertising appearing in UFC, which got very prompt, very negative feedback for users, leading to EA actually walking it back and, well, apologizing for the situation, right? A funky thing. Now, to get to what Wilson actually says, well, he doesn't actually say he's expecting to put ads in games during this call. So that tweet from Dexerto saying that EA are going to be putting adverts in AAA games, well, technically true if you're thinking about the UFC example, if you're thinking about where you could imagine a company like that going, but let's actually go to what Andrew Wilson actually said, right? So that we're grounded in reality first. So here's the quote. To answer your question on advertising broadly again, I think we're still early in that front, and we have looked over the course of our history to be very thoughtful about advertising in the context of our play experiences. Now, he does include saying that they do eventually expect to make money from advertising when games shift outside of their traditional model, which, per Wilson, basically means user-generated content platform types of games. Here's another quote from him. So, quote, looking at how we do very thoughtful implementations inside our game experiences. So you can see that Wilson is using very woolly language. He's not really committing to anything concrete, and he's certainly not saying that in between maps in your next Battlefield game that you'll get an advert for hot wings at Applebee's or something like that. And when you continue to go through what Wilson said, he actually appears to be more keen about advertising outside of their games. He says, more importantly, as we start to build community and harness the power of community beyond the bounds of our games, how do we think about advertising as a growth driver in those types of experiences? And that then brings us to why we're even talking about this in the first place. You can see here quite clearly that an investor wanted to know where to put their money, right? That's what they're trying to do. That's basically why earnings calls are there. It's why this is a heavily regulated space. So this is a chance for investors to tell EA what the investors care about. And for EA, it's a chance to convince those investors that EA does recognize their concerns and thinks about the same things, even if they don't intend to follow through. As an example, Electronic Arts never went deep into Web3 or crypto stuff, right? Basically no further than some spurious investments with partners. But the thing is, Andrew Wilson was very keen to tell investors that they were going to the future of the industry in 2021. They even went as far as hiring roles with experience, and that led to headlines like this one from PC Gamer. EA calls NFT and blockchain games the future of our industry. Has that been reflected in anything EA has done since? And that's because, ultimately, there's a bit of a trick going on in earnings calls, and this is a real useful skill to kind of have to cut through the corporate bollocks. Everything said in an earnings call kind of has to be objectively true, right? And that's because it's a listed company, and if a publicly listed company lies to investors, well, in this case, they would get in a lot of trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. So they're being objectively true, but it turns out you can be objectively true, but that doesn't mean what you're saying is real. And I know that sounds really strange, but what it means is if there's one person inside EA who is working on whether or not advertising in-game is a fundamentally profitable model, then EA's investors can be told that it's something they're looking into. EA gets to happily tell them about that on an earnings call. That's it. EA maybe pays for a few salaries to explore some ideas, right? And maybe that will eventually make the line go up somewhere down the line, maybe for Apex or FIFA or the user-generated content side of Sims 5. But right now what this is a very clear example of some investor pressure as a force that companies have got to manage, right? Because there's the times they speak to you and me as their customers. Maybe they might speak to the likes of me or other people as members of the press, of media, but then they speak to investors as investors. And the earnings call is just one of those things where they play it out strategically, they try to tick the boxes, even though you can tick a box in a way that leaves it ticked, but irrelevant. So it is not the time to raise alarm bells. That being said, I don't trust these companies. Ultimately, these investor pressures are real. And the challenging thing is that if another AAA company decides we're going to experiment with in-game advertising in a more meaningful way, then what will the investor class do? They will reward that behavior. And that will then create an incentive for other players in the industry to follow suit. And that will then lead to a degree of normalization. Now, there are places where we do see examples of this. Take the mobile game genre, right? In there, what they often do is for their free users, the free users can earn premium currency, but they do that by watching adverts. Now, we are in a time where AAA games are stupidly expensive to make. We're constantly seeing game development times of 6 to 7 years. 3.5 years to make Star Wars Jedi Survivor. That being 3.5 years was considered to be an absolute, like a remarkable feat of production on behalf of Respawn. So games take a long time to make, they're very expensive, and if they are these live service games, then you just have to have hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of staff who are able to feed content into that. Currently, the way that those games monetize in the long tail is battle passes, okay? Now, here's the problem with the battle pass or with the Diablo in-game store. I am never going to buy a bit of armor on the Diablo store. To me, that is honestly kind of stupid. Now, obviously, that's not an EA game, but say if you're Activision Blizzard, you're going to start thinking, okay, we are making bank from a bunch of our users. What else can we do? And maybe you have a more soft form of advertising that is more of a collaboration, as we see in the likes of Fortnite. It is not, to me, unthinkable, though, that you could see an encroachment of advertising in the future. Now, I don't think it would ever be as bad, as disruptive as it is in mobile games, but even now, take YouTube is investigating having pause screen ads on their TV platform. On lots of streaming platforms, you have pause screen ads. So who's to say that a loading screen ad couldn't be a thing? And who's to say that rather than direct advertising, they could go for incentivized user behavior in the way that in some places you can fill out a survey or whatever to get a little bit of in-game currency or just anything like that. Now, of course, for these companies, the large risk factor is that if they do that, they then cheapen a big premium experience. So I could only really see this happening in the context of free-to-play games, likely free-to-play games with user-generated content, with a large user-generated content marketplace that then has digital currency on it. So the idea of watch an advert, get some V-Bucks. That's the sort of thing that I absolutely do see coming to the industry. Ultimately, it is accepted on mobile. So the idea that maybe in the future, Epic could move into advertising, do that on Fortnite, on iOS and Android, where the idea of watching an advert for some currency is a totally normalized thing. And who knows where that thin end of the wedge goes. So ultimately, a lot of what Andrew Wilson said was very juicy, made for amazing headlines, and was rather blown out of proportion. He did not say that they're going to be doing that immediately. That being said, this does show investor pressure, and there are instances. Remember, what I said is, to a lot of the investor class, they are interested in games in that they might see games as a promising new industry, but they don't care about the games. Again, it's all widgets, right? Whether your widget seller is Activision Blizzard or Electronic Arts or Netflix or something else, they don't really care as much. And they are seeing other purveyors of digital widgets, the streaming services, do really well by having premium ad-supported tiers. That is the thing that I am personally worried about. Wilson did not give us a smoking gun or anything like that, but we do know the pressures that him and his management team are going to be under when it comes to games, especially as they probably think about the likes of the Battlefield franchise and how much they did struggle monetizing the live service aspect. So that ultimately then is what I think is going on today. I hope you found this to be interesting. I really do enjoy just getting into the weeds of these stories. And I suppose, as much as you can see a tweet saying Andrew Wilson's going to put ads into AAA games, and we can all get extremely alarmed and worried, what I'm more interested in is, why would Andrew Wilson want to do that, even if there's a voice in his head saying our audience won't like it? What are the pressures that he is under? And that's, I hope, what we've been able to do today, so that we all come out of this video just understanding the world a smidge more. But that is it for me. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and I suppose right on theme, thanks to today's sponsor for supporting what we do. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you back here again tomorrow.